Here is something that happened in my clinic about 3 years ago that I still think about. A man came in, 62 years old, retired firefighter, still active, still sharp. He looked healthy. He felt healthy. He had no chest pain, no major complaints, nothing that would make you worry. But his routine blood work told a completely different story. His liver enzymes were elevated. His arterial inflammation markers were significantly high. And when we looked deeper, we found early stage fatty liver and arterial stiffness beginning to develop silently, invisibly, in a man who had no idea any of this was happening inside his body. He looked at me and said, "But doctor, I feel fine." And that right there is what I want to talk to you about today. Because that phrase, "I feel fine," it may be the most dangerous thing a person over 50 can say about their health. The liver and the arteries are two of the most critically important systems in your body. And here is the frightening truth that most people do not know. Both of them can be in serious trouble for years, sometimes over a decade, before you feel a single symptom. By the time symptoms appear, the damage has often already been building quietly, layer by layer, for a very long time. But here's the good news, and I want to be very clear about this. It does not have to stay that way. The human body, even at 60, even at 70, has an extraordinary capacity to repair, to restore, and to regenerate, but only if you give it the right signals at the right time. What I'm going to share with you today is a simple 30-second morning practice that, when done consistently, sends a powerful biological signal to both your liver and your arterial walls. It costs nothing. It requires no equipment. And the science behind it is real, it is grounded, and it is something I personally believe in and recommend to my own patients. I'm a physician. I've spent over 2 decades studying how the body heals itself and how small daily choices at the cellular level either accelerate disease or reverse it. This channel, BioSecrets, exists because I believe every person deserves to understand what is actually happening inside their body, not in confusing medical terms, but in plain, honest language. So if you are new here, I would genuinely encourage you to subscribe and stay close to this conversation, because what I share here is the kind of information that changes how people live. Now, before I walk you through the morning practice itself, I need to make sure you understand why it works. And to do that, I have to tell you some things about your liver and your arteries that most doctors never take time to explain. So stay with me here, because every piece of this builds on the last. Let us start with the liver, because most people fundamentally misunderstand what this organ actually does. When most people think about the liver, they think about alcohol. They think liver damage is something that happens to people who drink heavily, and if you do not drink much, your liver is probably fine. That assumption is dangerously wrong, and it is costing people their health in enormous numbers across this country. Here is what your liver actually does every single day. It filters roughly 1.4 liters of blood every single minute. It produces bile to break down fats. It stores glycogen for energy. It metabolizes hormones, including the stress hormones that flood your body when you are anxious or not sleeping well. It processes every medication you take, every chemical from your environment, every artificial ingredient in processed food, every pesticide residue on produce. And it does all of this continuously, 24 hours a day, without you ever feeling it work. Now, here is where it becomes very important for anyone over 50. As we age, the liver's regenerative capacity begins to slow. It does not stop, and that is crucial, but it does slow. The liver cells, called hepatocytes, become less efficient at flushing out toxins. The blood flow to and through the liver can decrease, and the liver becomes more vulnerable to something called hepatic inflammation, which is essentially low-grade chronic irritation at the cellular level. When this happens, fat begins to accumulate inside liver cells, not because you are eating enormous amounts of fat, but because the liver's ability to process and export fat slows down. This is what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. And the numbers here are staggering. Research suggests that approximately 1 in 4 adults in the United States has some degree of fatty liver, many of them completely unaware. Think of it this way. Imagine your kitchen sink with a drain that is slowly getting clogged. At first, the water drains fine, maybe just a little slower than before. But over months, over years, if nothing clears that drain, eventually the water backs up. What was once a small inefficiency becomes a real problem. That is what fatty liver does to your metabolism. It backs up your body's ability to process fats, regulate blood sugar, manage inflammation, and maintain hormonal balance. And here is the chain reaction that most people do not see coming. When the liver is inflamed or overloaded, it begins releasing compounds into the bloodstream, specifically inflammatory cytokines, that travel directly to the walls of your arteries and begin damaging them. So, a liver that is struggling does not just hurt itself, it starts hurting your heart. Which brings me to your arteries. And again, I want to correct a widespread misunderstanding that could be putting your life at risk. Most people believe that arterial disease is primarily about cholesterol. Eat too much fat, cholesterol goes up, it sticks to your artery walls, and you get blockages. That model is too simple and it leaves out the most important part of the story. The real driver of arterial disease is inflammation. Cholesterol does not just randomly stick to a healthy, smooth arterial wall. It accumulates at sites where the arterial lining, called the endothelium, has already been damaged or inflamed. The endothelium is essentially a very thin, delicate sleeve of cells that lines the inside of every blood vessel in your body. When it is healthy, it is smooth and flexible. Blood flows cleanly through it. When it is damaged by oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, poor blood sugar regulation, or yes, signals from a struggling liver, it becomes sticky, rough, and vulnerable. This is where plaque starts, not in healthy arteries, in damaged ones. Here is the analogy I use with patients. Imagine a clean, polished pipe. Water flows through it without any resistance. Now scratch the inside of that pipe, rough it up, damage the lining. Suddenly things begin to stick. Rust forms, buildup accumulates, flow becomes restricted. That is what is happening inside your arteries when endothelial damage goes unchecked over time. And for people over 50, this process has typically been underway for years. The arteries lose flexibility in a condition called arterial stiffness. The endothelium becomes less responsive. The body's ability to naturally dissolve small clots and maintain healthy blood flow diminishes. Blood pressure often creeps upward, not because the heart is pumping harder, but because the vessels themselves have lost their elasticity. The critical insight here is this: addressing arterial health is not only about changing what you eat, it is about reducing the inflammation and oxidative stress that is actively damaging your arterial lining and starting every single morning. Now, I want to bring these two systems together, the liver and the arteries, because they are not separate problems. They are connected. When you support one, you support the other. And there is a specific morning practice that activates biological mechanisms in both simultaneously in under 30 seconds. Here's what I want you to do. Every morning, within the first 15 minutes of waking up, before coffee, before food, before you check your phone, I want you to do the following. Take 8 to 10 ounces of room temperature water. Add the juice of half a fresh lemon. Add a small pinch, and I mean a very small pinch, of natural unprocessed sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. And then critically add between a quarter to half a teaspoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar. Stir it together and drink it slowly over about 30 seconds. That is the entire practice. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, that is it? That seems too simple. And I understand that reaction completely. We are conditioned to believe that powerful interventions must be complicated or expensive. But let me walk you through exactly what happens inside your body in the moments after you drink this, because it is genuinely remarkable. The lemon juice is where we start. Fresh lemon contains a compound called citric acid, along with a class of antioxidants called flavonoids, particularly one called hesperidin, which has been studied for its effects on vascular inflammation and endothelial function. When you consume lemon juice first thing in the morning in a fasted state, your body absorbs these compounds rapidly. Hesperidin has shown real promise in research for supporting the flexibility and responsiveness of arterial walls, and citric acid directly supports one of the liver's primary detoxification pathways called the citric acid cycle, which is essentially the engine your liver cells use to convert waste products into compounds the body can safely eliminate. Drinking lemon water first thing in the morning also stimulates bile production. Bile is produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, and it plays a critical role in fat digestion. When bile flows well, the liver has less backup, less accumulation, less burden. Think of bile production as turning on the drain in that kitchen sink. Stimulating it first thing in the morning before you eat gives your liver a head start on the day. Now, the apple cider vinegar. This is where the real depth of this practice lies and where the science becomes especially interesting. Raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar contains acetic acid, which is its primary active compound. Acetic acid has been shown in multiple research contexts to influence blood sugar regulation by improving insulin sensitivity in the cells. This matters enormously for the liver because elevated blood sugar, even mildly elevated blood sugar, which is extremely common after 50, directly promotes the accumulation of fat inside liver cells. It is the same mechanism that drives fatty liver in people who do not drink alcohol at all. By improving insulin sensitivity first thing in the morning, you are essentially interrupting that fat accumulation process before it gets a chance to start for the day. Acetic acid also influences something called AMPK, an enzyme that researchers sometimes describe as the body's metabolic master switch. When AMPK is activated, it signals cells to burn stored energy more efficiently, supports mitochondrial function, and reduces the production of inflammatory compounds in the liver. This is not fringe science. AMPK activation is one of the most actively studied areas in metabolic research, and it is the same pathway targeted by certain diabetes medications. The difference is that acetic acid activates it gently, naturally, and without the side effects. For your arteries, the benefit is equally significant. Inflammation in the arterial wall is partly driven by insulin resistance and elevated blood glucose. When you take steps in the morning before eating anything to support insulin sensitivity, you are directly reducing one of the primary inflammatory triggers that damages the endothelium throughout the day. The small amount of sea salt in this morning drink is often the element people question most. And this is important to understand correctly. I am not recommending this for people who have been told by their doctor to strictly limit sodium. Please always follow your physician's specific guidance. But for most people over 50 who are otherwise healthy, a trace amount of unprocessed mineral salt in the morning serves a different purpose entirely from the sodium in processed food. Unprocessed sea salt contains trace minerals, magnesium, potassium, calcium, that support healthy cellular hydration and electrolyte balance. After 6 to 8 hours of sleep without any fluid intake, your body's first priority is rehydration at the cellular level. These trace minerals help water actually enter the cells rather than passing through them. When cells are properly hydrated, every physiological process, including liver detoxification and arterial signaling, functions more efficiently. And the room temperature water itself, not cold, not ice, matters more than most people realize. Cold water first thing in the morning causes the blood vessels in the digestive tract to constrict, which actually reduces the absorption of the beneficial compounds you are consuming. Room temperature water allows immediate, smooth absorption and gently stimulates gastrointestinal motility, which is the movement that helps your gut clear out waste that accumulated overnight. Now, let me be honest with you about something because I think it is important. This 30-second morning practice is not a cure. I want to be completely transparent about that. If you have advanced liver disease, significant cardiovascular disease, or any serious medical condition, you need to be working closely with your physician. And this practice should complement that care, not replace it. What I am describing to you is a supportive, evidence-informed morning ritual that over time consistently sends beneficial signals to two of your most important biological systems. The operative words there are over time and consistently. The retired firefighter I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, he started this practice along with some dietary adjustments we discussed. He also started walking 30 minutes most mornings. 6 months later, his liver enzyme levels had normalized, his inflammatory markers had come down significantly. He was sleeping better, his energy had improved, and he told me he felt, as he put it, like the rust had been cleaned out. So, now, I cannot point to one specific thing that caused those changes. Health never works in perfectly isolated variables. But what I can tell you is that the morning drink was the first thing he started before anything else, and he has not missed a single morning since. There is one more thing I want to address because I know it is on the minds of many people watching this, especially those of you who are in your 50s, 60s, or even 70s. You may be thinking, is it too late? Has the damage already been done? I want to answer that question very carefully and very honestly. The liver is one of the most remarkable organs in the human body in terms of its capacity for regeneration. It is, in fact, the only internal organ that can significantly regenerate itself, even in adulthood. Liver cells that have been stressed by inflammation or mild fat accumulation can, with the right biological environment, recover meaningful function. This is not wishful thinking. This is observed biology. The question is simply whether you are creating the conditions that allow that regeneration to happen or whether you are continuing to create conditions that prevent it. As for the arteries, arterial stiffness and endothelial damage can also be meaningfully addressed even in later decades of life. Research from multiple centers studying vascular aging has shown that lifestyle-based interventions can improve arterial elasticity and endothelial function in adults well into their 70s. The body does not simply stop responding because you are older. It responds more slowly, yes. It requires more consistency, yes, but it responds. The window for positive change in your liver and arterial health does not close at 50 or 60 or 70. What changes is the urgency, because every year that passes without addressing these systems is another year of accumulating damage that takes longer to reverse. Not impossible to reverse, but longer. That is why I want you to start tomorrow morning, not next week, not after the holidays, tomorrow morning. Before I finish, I want to briefly mention a few things that will undermine this morning practice if you do not address them. And these are common pitfalls that people over 50 fall into without realizing it. The first is immediately following this drink with coffee. Wait at least 20 to 30 minutes. Coffee is acidic, and when taken immediately after apple cider vinegar and lemon, it can cause gastric irritation and also interferes with the optimal absorption window that the morning drink creates. Give your body a short interval to absorb what you have given it. The second is using bottled lemon juice from a plastic container. This matters. Bottled lemon juice is often pasteurized, which destroys much of the flavonoid content. The hesperidin and other beneficial compounds I mentioned are heat sensitive. Fresh lemon cut, squeezed yourself is the version that works. This takes 10 seconds. Do not skip it. The third is using apple cider vinegar that is clear and filtered. You want the kind with what is called the mother, the slightly cloudy, stringy sediment you see at the bottom of the bottle. That is where the bioactive compounds are. Shake the bottle before you measure your half teaspoon. That small detail changes what you are actually consuming. And finally, drink this through a straw or rinse your mouth lightly with plain water afterward. The acidity of lemon and vinegar, while beneficial to your metabolism, is not ideal for prolonged contact with tooth enamel. A simple rinse takes 2 seconds and protects your teeth without interrupting any of the benefits. I want to close with this. Every morning you wake up and you make choices. Most of those choices feel invisible. They feel ordinary, unremarkable. You do not feel your liver working. You do not feel your arteries stiffening or staying flexible. You do not feel the inflammation rising or falling in your vascular walls. All of that happens silently outside your awareness, driven by the accumulation of tiny daily signals. But those signals are not random. You generate them every single day. And the most powerful moment in your health, the moment where you have the most leverage, the most biological receptivity, the most potential to set the tone for everything that follows, is the first 15 minutes after you wake up. In 30 seconds, you can either give your liver and arteries a gift that compounds over time into something remarkable, or you can simply let another morning pass. The retired firefighter is still running. His arteries are more flexible than they were 3 years ago. His liver is clean. And he drinks his morning blend every single day before he does anything else. That is not magic. That is biology working in your favor because someone finally gave it the right signal. If this conversation was useful to you, please share it with someone you care about, a spouse, a parent, a close friend. Most people over 50 have no idea that both of these systems are quietly under pressure inside them. And the earlier someone learns this, the better their outcome. If you have a question, leave it in the comments below. I read them and I will answer when I can. This community exists for exactly this kind of honest, real conversation about your health. And I am grateful you are part of it. Take care of yourself. Stay consistent. And I will see you in the next one.